Welcome to Daily Airline News, focusing on the search for MH370. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey from Germany. Good morning to you, Richard.
And good afternoon to you, Jeffrey.
It's indeed a lovely afternoon. So our poll, we closed it last night, midnight UTC. Richard, what was the response? It seems like it was pretty strong.
Yeah, a huge response. There were 629 valid and unique responses. There were some people who answered more than once, but took the first one. The question, will MH370 be found? 76% say yes, 8% were neutral, and 16% said no. So the yeses, being positive individuals, I suppose, are all hopeful we will find it.
Hmm.
Um, there was quite a number of very interesting responses, however. One particular response, which got 30 likes from different people, it cannot be found if we're not searching.
Yeah.
A very profound statement.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that I was thinking of the Bible and seek and ye shall find, but
Yeah.
if you don't seek, then you shall not find.
Yeah.
Um, that response was as a neutral response and was of course counted as a valid neutral response. There was another guy who very cleverly defined what a pole is, but a pole spelt Pole. And he says it's a long cylindrical device first used for telegraph wires, etc. Well, unfortunately, that was counted as an invalid. And I
Mhm.
won't embarrass the viewers by telling them how many people spelt pole, P-O-L-L, Pole. But there are a lot
Yeah.
of you out there. um, this was the next one I just loved. There was one guy, we asked yes, neutral, or no. He answered all three. No during the first year, or this year, neutral during the next decade, and yes in future decades thereafter. Um, so
Lovely.
he qualified each with a time frame. I took that as a valid yes in the count that I've given you. Um, and this one I counted as a valid neutral. It says it depends if the aliens bring it back. Um, so, there are a lot of people with a sense of humor out there. This one I didn't like. These polls of what people think are dumb. Who cares what people think? Blah, blah, blah. That was counted as invalid. Um,
Definitely.
and I think actually, Jeffrey, you've deleted that one.
I think I might
Since
have. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so if you want to do something a bit clever or a bit amusing, that's fine. But if you want to tell us that and all the other viewers that we're dumb, then I think at that point we draw the line.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, in terms of time frame, not so many respondents added a time frame. The majority simply answered yes, neutral, or no. If people did add a time frame, it ranged from November, when the search is supposed to restart, right through to not in my lifetime or decades from now. Um, those who were a bit more precise on a time frame mostly indicated it will take several years to get MH370 found. And one commenter asks why we don't use the YouTube community service to run a poll. The reason for that is you can't add free text to you get the question, will MH370 be found? And you can click on yes or neutral or no, but that's it. And if you want to add some reason or time frame or any other qualifying statement, there's no free text facility. So we prefer on sort of open questions to use the comment with a keyword like survey or poll. Um, if we have another survey which is, very clear question and a very clear yes no type answer, or yes no and neutral, then we will use the YouTube service to run a poll.
Right. So we've got some great comments as usual. And if we don't get to your question, please forgive us because there are simply hundreds of them. And many of them are duplicating questions we've already had before. And so we can only repeat the same sort of questions so many times. And we do apologize to you for that. And we do try and get to them and answer some of them on the YouTube channel as well. So, but thank you so much for them. They're really fantastic. Now, this one I grabbed from your website, Richard. I thought it was good. It's from Tina. Is it possible that the pilot in control could have pulled the circuit breakers to the black boxes at Igari? That's the waypoint Igari. So even if found, we'll have no recording except for the first part of the flight.
Yeah, I thought it was a very good question too, Tina. And yes, it is possible to pull the circuit breakers, but it's not possible to do that from the cockpit. This is one of the differences between a Boeing 777 and the Silkair case that we looked at yesterday, where on a Boeing 737, the circuit breakers are in the cockpit. In the Boeing 777, you have to enter the main equipment center, or the MEC as it's called, which is located underneath the cockpit floor. And there is an access hatch outside the cockpit in the forward galley area, and you can lift the floor carpet and open a hatch. And there is a ladder that allows you to descend into the MEC in the floor below. The CVR, cockpit voice recorder, or Vox recorder as it's called, the circuit breaker for that is a 115 volt AC circuit breaker and is on the left power management panel, P110. The FDRS circuit breaker, the flight data recorder system, for both 115 volt AC and 28 volt DC are on the right power management panel, P210. But you have to know what you're doing because on a Boeing 777, there are around 480 circuit breakers, 130 in the cockpit, 176 in the MEC under the cockpit. There are a number also in the cargo area and in the galley areas. So if you don't have expert knowledge, you could end up pulling the wrong circuit breaker.
Yes, they're quite amazing, those minimum equipment bays. I've been in a number of them. The A380 was just extraordinary. It's just like a little city down there with literally thousands and thousands of wires and hundreds of computers. It's really quite mind-boggling what is below the floor and behind panels. Yeah.
And
So
on the new aircraft, the new designs, for example, the A350 or the B787, there's so much avionics. It's not all under the floor in under the cockpit or in the cockpit or behind the cockpit. It stretches out now into other areas throughout the aircraft and in the cargo bay in the passenger cabin in the area above the roof of the cabin. So the amount of avionics on an aircraft is just incredible.
It is. So Sweeper 107. Hi, gents. Any reason why there is no independent radio equipment in the cabin of a passenger aircraft? This could be used in such situations to call in emergencies. Keep up the good show. Thanks. Good question.
Yeah, a very good question and an interesting idea. The reason they keep radio to the cockpit and radio with the ground is because the captain and the co-pilot in the cockpit can't see what the crew are doing in the cabin or vice versa. So you might have two people trying to call at the same time. Um, but in an emergency situation, I think it's a good idea. And if the captain and co-pilot know that there's a means of direct communication from the cabin, then that might put them off trying to do something untoward.
Yeah. So this is from Everett Balland. In my humble opinion, the passengers and cabin crew succumbed prior to the co-pilot leaving the flight deck. In the unusual turns, regular folks would have become inquisitive. The co-pilot probably made the phone attempt when he realized the conditions in the cabin. That's a bit of an unusual one, but Richard, perhaps you can throw some detail at exactly what we believe happened.
Yeah. Everett, in my humble opinion, I have a different opinion to you. Uh, if the cabin was depressurized, then oxygen masks are deployed in the cabin automatically. So there's no choice. The captain and the co-pilot don't have any choice about that. It happens automatically. And there will be around 20 minutes supply, which is designed to be enough time to descend to 10,000 feet, where you can start to breathe more normally again. Um, the pilot and co-pilot in the cockpit are supposed to don their emergency full face oxygen mask within 5 seconds if a depressurization occurs. And there are different kinds of depressurization, an explosive decompression due to a failure in the fuselage, or there is the possibility from the cockpit to depressurize the aircraft with opening valves from the cockpit panel. Now, having said that, the last radio communication we have was at 17:19:30 UTC, and that was identified as being made by Captain Sahari Shah. And around 65 seconds later, the transponder was switched off in the cockpit. And I'm now assuming that it was Captain Sahari Shah who switched off the transponder, and he didn't want the co pilot to observe him doing that. So the co pilot was asked for some reason to leave the cockpit and probably between 17:90:30 and 17:20:35, but we don't know that for sure. And as you point out, the co-pilot mobile phone was detected, but that was at 17:52:27 over Penang Island around 32 minutes later. Yeah. So the sequence we believe is that the co-pilot left the cockpit and was locked out around 17:19:30 UTC, and certainly before 17:20:35 UTC. Then Captain Sahari Shah switched off the transponder, the SATCOM, the IFE and the moving map display in the cabin phone system and messaging system, and then he diverted the aircraft. Captain Sahari Shah, having donned his emergency mask uh, with oxygen, then depressurized the aircraft. And the co pilot, recognizing that the cabin masks were deployed, grabbed a portable oxygen bottle. And that would be an automatic reaction for the co pilot to do that. Um, the co pilot, having realized he was locked out of the cockpit and that the aircraft was not descending to 10,000 feet, then activated his mobile phone as a last resort to try and communicate.
From Rhett Jazz 1018. Everyone has cell phones. In the USA, turbulence can cause a percentage of passengers to call or text their loved ones goodbye. Yes, that's happened. It's the main reason why I don't believe a pilot was locked out of the cockpit. Surely he and crew members at the very least would have been on their phones. So I guess my question would be, is there a way for someone who has not been planning for this situation to disable all passengers and crew within 30 seconds? Not interested in how, just is there a way?
No, not in 30 seconds. We said yesterday that there were no systematic check of all passengers' mobile phones. So we really don't know what mobile phones might have been switched on and what mobile phones may have been where passenger attempted to make a call or send a text message. There was a systematic check of the crew mobile phones. And we had talked about the co pilot phone being detected. It may be that the other crew were aware and told by the co pilot that he was going to activate his mobile phone and try and contact. So, for that reason, other crew members were not trying to use their phones to contact the ground. If an aircraft fails to descend, then the oxygen masks that come out of the cabin ceiling will not help to save the passengers. It will take longer than 30 seconds, but when you are struggling with an oxygen mask, your focus is on breathing and not on making a call. The location of the diversion is out of range of a mobile connection, which would only be possible when nearer to Kota Baru on the coast of Malaysia, around 15 minutes after diversion. So the Kota Baru airport radar picked up an aircraft thought to be MH370 at 17:30:53 UTC, and the aircraft was still 106.8 kilometers from the radar, and the radar is quite close to the coast. And it is not until 17:36:35 UTC that the aircraft is within range of the coast and within range of a mobile tower. And bearing in mind it was possibly still at 35,000 feet or possibly even higher, which makes it the higher you go, the more difficult to make a connection. So it's not a simple, straightforward answer, I'm afraid, and it will take longer than 30 seconds.
And one of the things we have to remember too, I think we did cover this too, Richard, is that we're talking 10 years, 11 years ago now, and mobile phones have come a long way in 11 years, far more powerful, far better range than what existed back then. So that's another dynamic to take into consideration.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the maximum range back in 2014 was 35 kilometers.
Yeah.
And that's what I've taken. And when you're 110 kilometers offshore, you can see it's going to take a while until you get within range back in 2014.
So from Kevin A. Prue, hello, I was wondering what is the reason for being able to manually shut off the transponder? What are the settings on the transponder and in what situation would they need to be moved? I'm sure you've covered this in the past. Yes, we have, but I found it awesome. Awesome work, gentlemen.
Yeah, we've covered it many times before, and there are different settings on the transponder. Um, Standby means it's off completely and not sending anything, any traffic, radio traffic to let them know in the on the ground at ATC where the aircraft is and at what altitude. You can choose a setting with everything being sent both to the ATC on the ground and to all other aircraft in the vicinity. And that information is used in the traffic collision avoidance system. Now, there's also a setting where only the traffic alert for the collision avoidance system is sent. You can also decide not to send your altitude because there's something wrong with the altitude system being, and you don't want to send incorrect altitude, so you switch just to sending latitude and longitude. Then there is the complete standby, and you can move that switch from one position to the other, and that's how we know the transponder was switched off in the cockpit because it went through a period of 1 second of not sending altitude, and then it ceased to send any position at all. And the reason you can switch it to standby in the cockpit, there are two reasons which we've gone through before. One is in a busy airport, you can get a lot of clutter because there are a lot of aircraft and a lot of ground vehicles with a transponder. And sometimes the ATC will ask particular aircraft to switch off the transponder just to avoid that clutter. And the second reason, if there's a failure in the transponder and it's giving out the wrong location data, it could cause a collision avoidance when that's not necessary at all, and we want to avoid doing that.
Right. Simon Brown, 7893, that the co-pilot appeared to have attempted to call on his mobile phone rather than available communication in the cockpit indicates to me that something very dodgy had occurred. It is a terrible thought, but all factors seem to point to a very experienced pilot avoiding detection by deliberate actions. Of course, we cannot be sure, and I'm doubtful that when the plane is found, there'll be sufficient evidence to confirm what happened anyway. We've covered this before, but it keeps coming up, so let's have a look at it again.
Yeah, well, Simon brings a new aspect to the question, and that
It
is,
does.
will we ever have sufficient evidence to confirm
Mm.
what happened? And I would point out, Simon, we have quite some evidence already. We will gain obviously more evidence, hopefully, when the aircraft is found. Um, and, the jury's out whether we will then have sufficient evidence to be able to draw a conclusion on exactly what happened and why. But I'm very hopeful we will have sufficient evidence to be able to draw a conclusion. And in law, it's beyond reasonable doubt. And when you can establish beyond reasonable doubt a certain set of events took place, then I think that would stand up in a court of law.
Okay, from Stu Whiskey November Zulu. Why is the oxygen for passengers such a small amount for such a short time? I'm a regular long distance flyer, and if I ever have to put the mask on, I think I've only got 20 minutes to live. Now, and this is a hijacking. Surely this would be something to be rectified along with all the tracking measures being taken so passengers can have greater chance of survival. Everything seems to be aimed at tracking and recovery of the plane after the fact. But what about passengers surviving and maybe intervening beforehand? Seems all too easy to kill a plane full of people. I think this is a massive red flag. Love the channel. Keep up the great work. Thinking of the Anzacs here in New Zealand this weekend. Well, that was a military holiday celebrated in Australia and New Zealand. That ANZAC stands for Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, and for the First World War and the Second World War.
Yeah, Stu, it's a good question, a good point. The 20 minutes is basically ample time to get an aircraft at, say, 35,000 or 40,000 feet down to 10,000 feet. It should only actually take a few minutes to do that, say 5 or 6 minutes. So 20 is plenty in relation to 5 or 6 minutes. But you point out, but what if it's a hijacking and the pilot is forced not to descend to 10,000 feet? Yeah, so you have a good point. Why don't we then increase the time? But then the question arises, how long do you need? And if an aircraft like MH370 has got fuel for another 7 hours or 6 hours of flight, then you know you having an oxygen system for the all of the passengers that lasts 6 or 7 hours is a completely different system, which would add a lot of weight in aircraft design, and that means fuel costs would be higher. That means airfares would go up. So then you've got the balance with the airlines wanting to bring airfares down and make it more affordable for passengers versus wanting to keep up a safety track record. And I have to say, the number of hijackings are very, very, very few.
This next question, actually, James Baldwin's asked two questions. I'm just going to give you one, Richard. It's from James Baldwin, I3B. Thanks so much for your hard work and for keeping the general interest going at a responsible, factual, and professional level. The question he wants to ask is, today I learned there is an interview with Jean-Luc Marchand in English. I have much respect for him. In the interview, he states that there is a gap of 6 years in the company medical records of Captain Sahari Shah. Yes, 6 years. He also states that quoting, we know were numerous phone calls in a short lapse of time with the doctor. I had not heard this before. Do you know anything about it, and is it irregular?
Well, I find it fascinating insight from Jean-Luc Marchand, and I respect his work too. Um, we are actually only given the last two routine medical reports for Captain Sahari Shah. One was on the 30th of June 2013, and the next one on the 3rd of December 2013. So, supposed to take place every 6 months in his case. We were also given the only report of a hospitalization and an operation that Captain Sahari Shah had, and that was back in 2007. And that was for an operation on his spine to relieve a problem of lower back pain resulting from spinal compression and what is known as rhizolysis. I'm not a medical expert, so I got that pronunciation wrong probably. Trapping of nerves and damage to nerves in the spine, basically. So I think it's actually misleading to imply there's a 6 year gap in the company medical records. There was a 6 year gap between the operation report that we had and the routine medical reports that we were shown, um, there is no evidence that these medical checks did not take place regularly. In fact, there is evidence to the contrary. In the two reports that we have, it is mentioned that there were no visits to the doctor. He was never rejected for military service on medical grounds, never rejected for an insurance policy on medical grounds, and had never failed a medical on a routine pilot check either. So, a pretty good bill of health. And the only one incident was back in 2007 for the spinal compression. The last medical shows a schedule for the next medical in 6 months with a due date of the 30th of June 2014, the next ECG in June 2014, the next hearing test in June 2015, and the next chest x-ray in June 2017. So I think there was a good attempt in the reports by the Royal Malaysian Police to establish the medical record over a longer period. And I don't see a suspicious cover-up with a 6-year gap in the medical data.
Thank you, Richard. Viewers, that's all we've got time for. I'm sorry, we're going to have to round it up, and we'll be back tomorrow with more of your questions on MH370. There's some great ones to come up. Richard, thank you for all your research and work. Viewers, please subscribe, please like us, and please do tune in tomorrow for another episode of Daily Airline News focusing on MH370.